Something strange is happening in Hudson. Ty's old cabin, quiet for years, untouched since the day Amy last locked the door, isn't empty anymore. The lights flicker at night. Footsteps echo on the porch when no one's there. Someone, or something, has returned. But the question is, who dares to step inside Ty's home, pretending to be part of his world again? The wind was calm that evening when Amy drove past Ty's old cabin. It had been months since she last visited. She usually brought flowers every few weeks, but life had been busy with the ranch and Lindy's school. Yet that night, something made her slow down. Maybe it was the faint glow she saw through the window, or maybe it was just that feeling deep inside, the one that told her something wasn't right. She parked the truck and stepped out, her boots crunching softly against the frozen ground. The cabin looked exactly the same from a distance, but as she got closer, she noticed details she couldn't ignore. The front door, it was slightly open. That door had always creaked when Ty built it, but Amy remembered locking it after her last visit. The sight made her heart race. Inside, the air felt different, warmer, as if someone had been there just moments ago. A jacket hung by the door, not Ty's old one, but similar enough to make her heart ache. She ran her fingers over the rough fabric, and for a second, she could almost smell Ty's cologne, that mix of pine and horses that never really left her memory. The floor creaked beneath her boots as she moved toward the living room. Dust floated in the beam of her flashlight, but what caught her attention was the table. A mug sat there half full of coffee. The steam had faded, but it was fresh. Her hands trembled slightly as she whispered to herself, "Who's been here?" Amy slowly walked toward the back door and noticed muddy footprints leading out to the porch. They were large, not recent, but not old either. The tracks went toward the woods, the same path Ty used to take when he wanted time alone. Her throat tightened. She wanted to believe it was nothing. Maybe Caleb, maybe someone from the ranch checking in. But deep down, she knew this was different. As she stepped back outside, the wind picked up, and for just a moment, she thought she heard something, a voice, soft and distant. It sounded like someone calling her name. She turned quickly, but there was only silence. The light inside the cabin flickered once and went dark. Amy stood frozen, clutching her jacket, staring into the shadows. That night, she couldn't sleep. The sound of that voice, the memory of those footprints, kept replaying in her mind. She tried to convince herself it was nothing, but her heart said otherwise. Something or someone had come back to Ty's house, and Amy Fleming was going to find out who. The next morning, the sun rose quietly over Hudson, painting the hills in gold, but Amy's heart felt heavy. All night, she had thought about what she saw at Ty's cabin. The open door, the footprints, the mug of fresh coffee. It didn't feel like a dream, and she knew she couldn't ignore it. So she went back. As she drove the familiar road, memories flooded her mind. Ty laughing by the porch, fixing his old truck, holding Lindy in his arms. That cabin wasn't just a building. It was the heart of their story. But today, it felt like something sacred had been disturbed. When she stepped inside again, the air was colder than before. Dust still hung in the light, but there was something different, a faint smell of smoke, as if a fire had been burning in the night. The wood by the fireplace was still warm to the touch. Amy's breath caught in her throat. She looked around slowly. The table had been wiped clean. The mug was gone. Whoever had been there had returned, and they were trying to hide it. Amy stepped back outside, scanning the trees that circled the cabin. The woods were quiet to quiet. A crow flew off from a branch, breaking the silence for a second. Then, she saw it, a faint movement near the fence line, a shadow slipping behind a tree. "Hey!" Amy called out, her voice sharp but unsure. No answer, only the whisper of wind moving through the pines. Her heart pounded. She thought about running after the figure, but something held her back. Instead, she reached for her phone and took a picture of the footprints near the steps. She didn't know what she'd find, but she knew she couldn't face it alone. That evening, she drove to Heartland. Jack was outside, working on the barn. Amy tried to sound calm, but her voice shook. As she told him what happened, "There was someone in the cabin," she said. "Not just once, twice. They've been staying there." Jack paused, leaning on his shovel. His eyes softened, full of that quiet wisdom he always carried. "Amy, Maybe it's just someone passing through. You know how folks come around. Sometimes. Amy shook her head. No, Jack. They know Ty. They left his things, his jacket, pictures. It's like they know him. Jack frowned, concern settling into his features. All right, he said finally. We'll go together tomorrow. Take a look. If someone's been staying there, we'll find out who. But as night fell over Heartland, Amy couldn't shake the image of that moving shadow near the trees. She sat by the window, watching the stars flicker above the quiet fields. The world outside was peaceful, yet she couldn't forget that faint voice from the night before, the one that called her name. The morning came with a heavy fog over Heartland. The ranch looked calm, but Amy couldn't shake the feeling that something unseen was still watching. She hadn't told Lindy everything, just that she was going out with Grandpa to check on something. Deep down, she didn't want to scare her daughter, not until she knew the truth. Jack pulled up his truck beside her. His face was steady, calm as always, but Amy noticed the quiet worry behind his eyes. He'd seen too many strange things in his life not to take her seriously. The drive to Ty's cabin was silent at first. The tires rolled slowly over the dirt road, and the fog seemed to swallow the trees around them. Amy stared out the window, her thoughts tangled between fear and hope. Part of her wanted to believe it was Ty, that somehow, in some impossible way, he'd come back. But the rational part of her knew better. When they reached the cabin, Jack stepped out first. The air was still. No movement. No sound except the crunch of gravel under his boots. Stay close, he said softly. Amy nodded. Inside, everything looked normal at first glance. The table was empty. The floor was swept clean. It was almost too clean, like someone had tried to erase every trace of themselves. But then Jack noticed something Amy hadn't seen before. Near the old wood stove, a faint mark on the floor, a boot print, half smudged but fresh. He crouched down, running his thumb along the edge. That's not mine, he muttered. Amy's pulse quickened. She looked around, scanning every corner of the room. Her eyes stopped on the windowsill, and there it was. Ty's old photo of her and Lindy, the one that used to sit on his bedside table. But this wasn't the same one she'd left. It was a copy. The frame was new, and the photo looked freshly printed. Jack stood up slowly. Someone's been coming here often enough to bring that. His voice was low, serious. Whoever it is, they're not just passing through. Amy's eyes filled with confusion and disbelief. Why would anyone do this? Why pretend to live in his space? Before Jack could answer, the door creaked softly, like someone had pushed it from outside. Both froze. Jack motioned for Amy to stay behind him. He opened the door quickly, stepping out onto the porch, but there was no one there. Just the wind moving through the tall grass. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw a shadow slipping into the trees. Hey! Jack shouted, but the figure disappeared into the fog before he could take another step. Amy rushed out beside him. Did you see them? Jack nodded grimly. Yeah, and they're fast. He looked back at the cabin, his expression tightening. This isn't just a wanderer, Amy. Whoever's doing this, they know the place, and they don't want to be found. That night, after returning home, Jack called Lisa and told her everything. Lisa listened carefully, worry settling in her tone. Someone living in Ty's cabin? That's not something we can ignore, Jack. We need to tell the others. Maybe even the sheriff. But Jack hesitated. He knew Amy's heart was still fragile. Reopening old memories could hurt more than help. Not yet, he said quietly. Let's find out what's really going on first. Later that evening, Lisa stood by the barn, watching the last light fade over the hills. As the sky darkened, she noticed something unusual, a dim flicker of light far beyond the trees. It came from the direction of Ty's cabin. 2 nights passed after Jack and Amy's visit to the cabin, but the unease didn't fade, it only grew stronger. The ranch felt different now. The air carried a quiet tension, like the land itself knew something was out of balance. Amy tried to distract herself with work, feeding the horses, training with Lindy, but her thoughts kept circling back to that cabin in the woods. Then came the night Lisa saw him. She had gone outside to bring the dogs in when she noticed movement near the far fence line. At first, she thought it was one of the ranch hands, maybe Caleb returning late. But as her eyes adjusted to the dim light, she froze. The person walking toward the barn was wearing Ty's old jacket, the same brown one. he used to wear on cold mornings, the one Amy had folded and left inside the cabin, untouched for years. Lisa stepped closer, her voice steady but quiet. "Hello? Who's there?" The figure stopped. The porch light caught just enough of his face to show a shadowed outline, not Ty's, but similar in build, the same height, the same calm way of standing. Before she could say another word, he turned away and disappeared into the dark. Lisa rushed inside, calling out for Jack. Within minutes, they were in the truck, driving down the road toward Ty's cabin once again. The headlights cut through the fog, the silence heavy between them. When they arrived, the cabin door was open again. Jack stepped out, flashlight in hand. The beam caught the edge of a muddy boot print, leading inside. Amy, who had joined them after Lisa's call, followed behind, her breath sharp and uneven. She could feel her heart pounding in her chest as she whispered, "What if it's him, Jack?" What if Jack stopped her gently? "Amy, be careful. Whoever this is, they're not supposed to be here." They moved inside slowly. The cabin was dim, the smell of smoke still hanging in the air. A small fire crackled in the fireplace, and sitting in front of it, with his back to them, was the stranger. Amy froze. For a second, she couldn't move. His posture, his shoulders, everything about him reminded her of Ty. The room felt smaller, the silence louder. Jack's voice was low but firm. "You're trespassing, friend. You better turn around." The man didn't move right away. Then, slowly, he stood up. When he turned, Amy's breath caught in her throat. The face looking back at her wasn't Ty's, but it could have been. He had the same eyes, the same calm stare, just a little younger. Amy whispered, almost to herself, Who are you?" The stranger looked at her for a long moment. Before speaking, his voice was quiet, uncertain. "You don't know me, but I knew him." Jack stepped closer, his flashlight steady. "You'd better explain what you're doing here." The man took a deep breath, his gaze flickering toward Ty's photo on the wall. "My name's Nathan. Ty was my brother." The words hung in the air like thunder. Amy's heart stopped for a beat. Ty never mentioned a brother, not once. Jack looked at Amy, his face unreadable. Nathan continued softly, his eyes glistening. "He wrote to me years ago, said he wanted to make things right. I never answered. By the time I came looking for him, it was too late." Amy's voice trembled. "So you came here and stayed in his home?" Nathan nodded, guilt clouding his expression. "I just wanted to feel close to him, to understand who he was. I didn't mean to scare anyone." The silence that followed was heavy, filled with confusion, anger, and something else Amy couldn't name. She looked around the cabin, at the familiar walls, the worn furniture, the firelight flickering against Ty's photo. It felt like the past and present were colliding right there in front of her. The next morning, the cabin stood silent again, but this time, the silence felt different. The stranger, Nathan, had left before sunrise. Jack wanted to call the sheriff, but Amy asked him to wait. Something inside her needed answers first. After breakfast, she returned to the cabin alone. The sky was gray, the air thick with the smell of rain. As she stepped inside, she noticed how neat everything looked. Too neat. The fire had gone cold, but the ashes were fresh, still holding faint lines from the last piece of burned wood. It was as if Nathan had tried to erase himself, leaving nothing behind. But he didn't erase everything. Amy walked to the table and saw something tucked beneath the edge of Ty's old toolbox, a worn leather notebook. Its corners were cracked, the pages slightly damp from the night air. She opened it carefully, and the first thing she saw was Ty's handwriting. Her breath caught. For a moment, it felt like he was right there with her. But as she flipped through the pages, she realized something was off. The handwriting wasn't exactly the same, close, but not quite. The first few pages were letters, short notes addressed to Anne. Each one spoke about forgiveness, change, and second chances. The last letter ended abruptly. "If you ever come to Hudson, you'll know where to find me." Amy's hands shook slightly. The words felt real, but she didn't remember Ty ever mentioning them. Then, on the final page, a message written in a different hand, smoother, newer, caught her eye. It read, "I came too late, brother, but I'll keep your promise alive." Tears welled in Amy's eyes. She sat down at the table, the weight of the journal pressing against her chest. Everything started to make sense. Nathan hadn't come to pretend. He'd come to understand. As Amy read further, she found drawing sketches of the ranch, the horses, even a picture of Lindy with a smile. Some were rough, others gentle and detailed, like someone who had been quietly watching from afar. A quiet realization hit her. Nathan had been near Heartland for longer than she thought. He'd been observing, learning, almost studying Ty's world before stepping into it. The floor creaked behind her. Amy turned sharply. It was Georgie, standing in the doorway. "I saw your truck," Georgie said softly. "You're not here alone, are you?" Amy tried to smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. Not anymore. She handed Georgie the journal. As Georgie flipped through it, her brows furrowed. "These sketches. He must have followed us for weeks." Amy nodded slowly. "He wasn't trying to hurt anyone. I think he just wanted to belong." Ty was the only family he had left. Georgie sighed, placing the book back on the table. "Still, it's strange, isn't it? To walk into someone's life like that, pretending to be part of it." Amy looked around the cabin, the same walls that once held her laughter and Ty's quiet voice. "Maybe he wasn't pretending," she whispered. "Maybe he just wanted to feel what Ty felt here." Outside, the rain finally began to fall, soft and steady against the window. The journal lay open on the table, its pages fluttering gently in the breeze. Amy closed it and held it close to her heart. For the first time since Ty's death, she didn't feel alone. Not because Nathan had filled the space he left, but because, in his strange, broken way, he'd reminded her that love never really disappears. It just finds new ways to come home. The rain hadn't stopped since morning. It fell in soft sheets, wrapping the ranch in quiet gray. Amy sat on the porch, Ty's old journal resting in her lap. Every page she'd read pulled her deeper into a storm of emotions: confusion, anger, sympathy. Nathan's story was still unfinished, and the only way to understand it was to face him again. By evening, the rain had turned to mist. Amy knew where he'd go: back to the cabin, the place that wasn't his but somehow felt like home. She took the road alone, the headlights slicing through the fog. The forest loomed ahead, dark and still, like it was holding its breath. When she reached the cabin, the door was closed but unlocked. The fire inside burned low, its light flickering against the walls. Nathan sat on the floor beside it, his hands clasped tightly around something. Amy stepped in quietly, her boots soft on the wood. "You shouldn't have come back," she said gently, though her voice trembled. Nathan didn't turn. "I had nowhere else to go." Amy's eyes fell to the object in his hands, a folded letter. The paper yellowed and creased. He finally looked up, his expression tired but calm. "I found this in an old box under the porch. It's from him." He handed her the letter. The writing was unmistakable, Ty's handwriting. Her breath caught as she unfolded it. The words were simple, yet every line carried the warmth of his heart. "If you ever find this, it means I didn't get to say goodbye. But don't let the past chain you. Forgive yourself. Family isn't just blood, it's the people who choose to stay." Amy's voice broke as she whispered, "He really wrote this for you?" Nathan nodded slowly. "I think he wanted me to find it someday. I wasn't there when he needed me. I thought living in his home would bring me closer, but all I did was make things worse." Amy felt tears burning in her eyes. "You scared us. You scared me. But maybe you didn't mean to." Nathan stood up, his face full of regret. "I saw how everyone talked about him, how loved he was. I just wanted to understand how he changed, how he became the man I couldn't be." The silence between them was thick, but not cold. The firelight danced across the walls, and for the first time, Amy saw not an imposter but a broken man searching for something Ty had already found: peace. She took a slow breath. "You can't stay here, Nathan. This cabin, it's part of who he was, but it's also part of who we still are. You have to find your own place now." Nathan looked down, his eyes glistening. "I understand." He paused, then added softly, "He was lucky, you know, to have someone like you." Amy smiled faintly through her tears. "We were both lucky." Nathan stepped toward the door, stopping for one last look around the cabin. "I'll leave the journal with you. It belongs here." When he was gone, Amy sat by the fire, the letter still in her hand. The wind whispered through the cracks in the window, carrying the scent of rain and pine. For the first time in a long while, she felt something new, not just sadness, but release. The next morning, Heartland woke to clear skies. The storm had passed, leaving the fields fresh and shining under the soft light of dawn. Amy stood by the riverbank, holding the letter Ty had written, the one Nathan had found. The water flowed gently, just like the memories that had carried her through so many storms before. She unfolded the letter once more, her eyes tracing every curve of Ty's handwriting. The ink had faded in places, but his message still felt alive: forgiveness, love, and the strength to move forward. Amy closed her eyes and whispered, "You're still with us, Ty. Always." Lindy's small footsteps came up behind her. "Mom, are you talking to Dad again?" Amy smiled softly. "Yeah, sweetheart. Just telling him we're okay." Lindy reached out her tiny hand, placing a wildflower next to the letter. "He'd like that," she said. Back at the ranch, Jack sat on the porch, watching the horizon. When Amy and Lindy returned, he didn't ask questions. He didn't have to. He saw the calm in Amy's eyes and knew the answers were already found. She handed him the letter silently, and as he read it, his eyes softened with emotion. "He always knew what mattered most," Jack murmured. "Not where we come from, but how we choose to love." Later that afternoon, Amy walked to the barn. The horses stirred softly as she placed Ty's old jacket on the hook, the same one Nathan had worn. For a long moment, she stood there, her hand resting on the fabric. It no longer felt like a memory of loss. It felt like a promise that life, no matter how broken, always finds a way to heal. The camera would slowly pan across the ranch, the fences, the open fields, the glowing sky as Amy's voice echoed in narration. "We spend so much time searching for the people we've lost that we forget the ones still beside us. Sometimes the hardest goodbyes lead to the strongest beginnings." Ty's story didn't end, it just found a new chapter through those who loved him. As the sun began to set, Amy and Lindy sat together on the porch steps. The light touched their faces, golden and warm. In the distance, the horses grazed peacefully, the world calm again. Lindy leaned her head on Amy's shoulder. "Mom, do you think Dad can see us?" Amy smiled, her eyes glistening. "I think he never stopped." The camera would fade out on that image, a mother and daughter framed by evening light, the ranch bathed in gold. Ty's letter rests on the porch beside them. The words "family isn't just blood, it's the people who choose to stay." Catching the final rays of sun, soft piano music plays under the closing narration. Even when someone's gone, their love keeps guiding us in every memory, every sunrise, every heartbeat. And here at Heartland, love always finds its way home.